Mill made comparisons between my less-than-perfect pregnancy and Sil's flawless experience, which stung especially after Sil had given birth. For 9 months after that event, both Sil and my husband decided to cut off all communication with Mill. Now, my husband and I have been happily married for over 2 years and have shared our lives together for a total of 7 years. He is truly wonderful, he is the man I always dreamed of, and together we have built an incredible life filled with love and companionship. My family, which is quite large due to my Mexican heritage, wholeheartedly adores him. I have been fortunate, as not a single family member has expressed any dislike for him. His polite and kind nature is what initially drew me to him, and his charming demeanor continues to win over everyone around us. We complement each other perfectly, and our relationship is generally peaceful. We rarely argue, except when it comes to the topic of his mother, who is a significant source of stress in our lives. My husband's family is smaller than mine, consisting of just his parents and his sister, who recently got married. His parents fit the mold of conservative small-town Christians, with his mother being especially overprotective and controlling. She insists on family gatherings during holidays, making it clear that any disobedience to her wishes will lead to dramatic outbursts. My first encounter with his family was relatively smooth. My father-in-law and I clicked instantly, as he is calm and laid back. My sister-in-law, who returned from college 2 years ago, has also developed a wonderful bond with me, treating me as if I were her real sister. However, my interactions with Mill have been challenging. She often makes incredibly sexist remarks that are hard to endure. For instance, during a dinner, when asked about my profession, I proudly shared that I am a marine biologist focusing on conservation efforts for aquatic life. While my father-in-law expressed genuine enthusiasm and happiness about my career, Mill responded with a disapproving frown and chose to remain silent. Initially, I dismissed her reaction as inconsequential, but later my sister-in-law called my husband to inform him that Mill had expressed a desire for him to end our relationship. According to her, Mill believed I was not the right kind of woman for her son. Her reasoning stemmed from the belief that I did not conform to traditional gender roles, particularly because I have a fulfilling career that I am passionate about. My husband has always supported me in my career aspirations and has never suggested that he wants me to be a stay-at-home wife or pursue a job that aligns with traditional feminine roles. If he had, I would not have committed to our relationship. Unfortunately, Mill seemed to think he needed someone different, complaining that my successful career might prevent me from becoming a housewife after marriage and that he should have chosen someone more suitable. To my relief, my husband firmly told my sister-in-law to convey to his mother that his choice in marriage was solely his decision and not her concern. This moment was a significant green flag for me and part of the reason I chose to stay in our relationship despite Mill's negative views. However, as our relationship deepened, Mill's behavior grew increasingly hostile. Despite my husband's continuous efforts to shield me from her comments, it began with little snide remarks that escalated into more hurtful comments. Whenever we found ourselves alone, she continually inserted her belief that a good wife should stay home, managing the household while waiting for her husband to return. On several occasions, she directly told me that I did not seem like the kind of woman her son should have brought home, implying that I lacked the femininity necessary to bear children. At first, I thought she was joking, but as she repeatedly asserted this idea, it became clear that she was dead serious. I was taken aback by her narrow-minded outlook. One evening, during dinner at her insistence, she launched into a lengthy rant about how she longed for a time when women cared for their families while men went out to work. My husband quickly responded, noting that the world had changed significantly and that he considered himself fortunate to have a partner like me, someone who shares in earning a living and maintaining our home together. Since both my husband and I had solid careers and shared responsibilities for maintaining our household, it was important for us to communicate openly about our roles. One day, during a family gathering, my mother-in-law, M, expressed her views in a way that caught me off guard. She shook her head disapprovingly and insisted that women should behave in a traditionally feminine manner, while men should conform to masculine expectations. I sensed that her remarks were directed at me, but I made a conscious effort to remain calm and composed. Phil, my husband, noticed the tension and told her that it wasn't the right moment for such discussions. He wanted us to focus on the matters at hand. However, M became frustrated when she realized that her son was not siding with her. She continued to argue that she was merely stating what she believed to be the truth and that her intentions were rooted in wanting the best for her son. With that, she turned her gaze towards me, as if to emphasize her point, and I decided I had heard enough. Feeling overwhelmed, I quietly excused myself from the table and asked Phil to take me home. Without hesitation, he agreed, shooting a disappointed glance at his mother before we left. Later that evening, Phil called to discuss the incident, and I firmly told him that it was not up to M to dictate who he could marry or how I should conduct myself in my career. I urged him to encourage her to stop making snide comments about my job. Phil acknowledged my concerns and attempted to apologize on his mother's behalf, but I was not willing to accept it. He understood and made it clear to his dad that if Em did not apologize, he would distance himself from her. Perhaps it was this ultimatum that prompted her to reach out and offer an apology, which I graciously accepted on the condition that she would not bring up similar topics in the future. I managed to let go of that specific situation. Unfortunately, Em's behavior proved to be consistent. A few months later, once my husband and I had started living together, she found out that I was going on a research trip for several weeks. Alarmed, she called me and questioned who would be taking care of the home and her son while I was away. I was taken aback by her inquiry and decided to put her on speakerphone, allowing Phil, who was driving with me, to hear the conversation as well. I asked her to clarify what she meant, and she went on a rant about how, now that I was living with her son, I needed to act more maturely. She insisted that I should cancel the expedition and focus on being a good partner. Phil, clearly annoyed by her comments, firmly informed her that he did not require anyone to take care of him and emphasized that we were equal partners sharing responsibilities in our household. This only enraged her further, and she claimed that we could not get married because I did not know how to be a proper wife. Phil told her to mind her own business and ended the call. When he proposed to me later, Em was visibly upset, but her discontent escalated when she learned that we wanted a small wedding. Given my large family, it would be financially challenging to invite everyone, especially as we were planning to move into our own home. I had already decided on a small gathering for close family, promising to celebrate with extended family later on. However, Em challenged this idea, expressing a desire to invite all her friends whom she hadn't seen in a long time, claiming our wedding would be the perfect occasion for such a get-together. When Phil asked her if she would cover the cost for these guests, she took offense and asserted that as his parent, he should be embarrassed to even suggest such a thing, asserting that since we both earned well, we should be able to fund the entire event ourselves. We exchanged incredulous looks at her response, and we made it clear that our decision for a small wedding stood firm. We also said that if she invited anyone without our agreement, she would be responsible for their meals. Though Em disliked this arrangement, she found herself unable to push back against our decision. On the day of the wedding, her discontent was palpable as she loudly criticized every detail, even going so far as to express her disdain for my wedding gown. I chose to ignore her comments, determined to enjoy my special day without letting her negativity affect me. My friends worked hard to keep Em away from me for the remainder of the evening to shield me from further remarks. In April of the following year, we received joyful news that I was pregnant, something we had both been hoping for after trying for quite some time. We decided to wait until I was around 9 weeks along before sharing the news with our close family and friends, hoping to celebrate this new chapter in our lives together. At 9 weeks into my pregnancy, my husband and I decided it was time to share the exciting news with our close family and friends. However, this announcement stirred up some unexpected emotions, particularly from my mother-in-law, Mill. She expressed her disappointment when she found out she was not the first person we told. In a phone call, she confronted me about it, claiming that my husband's mother had every right to be informed first and that she felt let down by my decision. I explained to her that my husband and I preferred to wait a little longer before sharing such significant news. I told her that if she wanted to voice her complaints about our choice, she could directly speak to my husband, as I wasn't in the mood to hear her lectures on how a good woman should act. Especially just a month after I had announced my pregnancy. As luck would have it, shortly after my announcement, my sister-in-law, Sil, shared the news that she was also pregnant. We were both shocked but delighted to hear this, as it meant our family would soon welcome another little one. Sil was not married yet, but she had a serious boyfriend we all knew well. I anticipated that Mill would have feelings about Sil's pregnancy happening before marriage, and true to form, she made her opinions known. Thankfully, my husband stood by his sister through this challenge, and eventually, Mill came around. Both Sil and I began to spend more time together, bonding over our shared experiences of pregnancy. We leaned on each other for support, exchanging advice during this transformative yet sometimes difficult time. Together, we shopped for baby items and discussed plans for nursery themes. However, as this journey unfolded, Mill began comparing our pregnancies in a way that felt competitive and unnecessary. She would frequently make comments about how Sil seemed to be better prepared to be a mother because she had always been more of a homemaker compared to me, who continued to work. Mill's remarks didn't stop there. She would keep track of every little detail, making snide comments whenever she learned that I was feeling unwell or experienced morning sickness. If I happened to report more nausea than Sil, she would imply that this reflected poorly on my ability to carry a healthy baby, suggesting that Sil's womb was superior. Despite my efforts to ignore her remarks, they still managed to affect me, and Sil shared the same frustrations. When it was time to plan my gender reveal party, I asked Sil if she would spy on our doctor to find out the gender of my baby, so she could prepare the reveal envelope for me. Sil reciprocated the favor for her own gender reveal. This is when Mill's anger reached new heights. Upon learning about our plans, she showed up at our house, furious and yelling. She accused me of trying to take away her grandchild by not permitting her to organize the gender reveal party. Mill insisted that my husband should control me and allow her more involvement in my pregnancy. My husband quickly grew weary of her yelling, which was giving me a headache, and firmly told her to leave our home. He was clear that if she continued this way, she would risk being cut off from our future child's life. Mill threw a fit, crying and insisting that her intentions were pure, claiming she only wanted what was best for her grandchild. Despite her emotional exit, the situation left its mark. Later, we received concerned calls from both Phil and Sil, who were aware of the commotion and wanted to check on us. We relayed what had happened, and Sil was astonished to hear her mother's behavior. She encouraged me to take it easy, noting how my Mill's outburst had clearly upset me. As Christmas approached, my husband informed his mother that we would not be attending the family gathering due to my inability to travel long distances. Mill became angry, accusing him of trying to distance himself from the family. When her pleas fell on deaf ears, she hung up mid-conversation. We hoped she would accept our decision and not bother us further. However, a week later, she sent a text demanding that we come to her house at 4 p.m. My husband replied to remind her of our earlier discussion about not coming, but she called him, screaming that he had no right to neglect family obligations like this. She questioned whether I was attempting to stop him from coming. My husband clarified that it was a mutual decision for us not to attend, but Mill continued her tirade, insisting that he needed to control his woman. As time went on, I started to notice more and more how controlling and toxic my mother-in-law, Mil, was becoming. This behavior was getting more intense with each passing day. I decided to express my worries about her actions to both my husband and his sister. They both echoed my concerns, agreeing that she was definitely overstepping her boundaries and becoming a source of tension. While they supported me, dealing with my mother-in-law's behavior was exhausting. When the time came for me to give birth, everything happened so quickly that we barely had time to notify anyone. I unexpectedly went into preterm labor at 33 weeks, and our baby boy arrived after just a week at 34 weeks via emergency C-section. After my husband made sure that both the baby and I were doing well, he shared the wonderful news of our son's birth in the family group chat. He also informed my own family, and everyone was overjoyed and busy sending their congratulations. However, my mother-in-law had another emotional outburst because she felt left out of the loop. She flooded us with messages, expressing how upset she was that she had not been informed about my labor or the birth itself. She insisted that she should have been present in the delivery room to witness her grandchild entering the world. This was a puzzling demand, considering I would have never allowed her in that space, but I chose not to respond to her exaggerated claims as I was focused on my newborn. When we finally announced our son's name, she called my husband in tears. She complained that the name sounded too Mexican and insisted that we should change it to something else. When my husband stood firm and said he liked the name we chose, she then suggested it could be a middle name, while we should select a different first name. We naturally ignored her demands, yet she continued to fuss about it. When the time came for her to meet our son, she surprised us by insisting on calling him a completely different name. She tried to justify this by saying it could be her special name for him, but my husband quickly asked her to stop. Additionally, my mother-in-law expressed her dislike for the fact that I was breastfeeding. She argued that I should start using formula instead, so she could have more time with our baby. My own mother, who was there to support me, explained to her that newborns need breast milk, yet my mother-in-law continued to argue, claiming it was unfair. Her taunts and controlling nature were becoming increasingly unbearable, a fact that was clear to everyone around us. The final straw came when my mother-in-law invited me out for lunch, claiming she had something important to discuss. I tried to cancel it several times, but she persistently insisted that we needed to meet. When I finally agreed and arrived, she greeted me warmly, and we sat down to order food. After a brief moment, I asked her why she had wanted to meet, and that was when she brought up the topic of our son's godfather. My reaction was one of concern because I already knew she wouldn't like the answer. I carefully explained that my husband and I had decided to be godparents for each other's children. Her reaction was extreme. She began to cry in the middle of the restaurant and loudly accused me of betraying her. She argued that my husband had his family and insisted that she should be named as our son's godmother because she had the right, being a grandparent. I reminded her that she had previously thought my husband's sister would be a better fit to take care of the children, so she should have been relieved that our son would have a capable godparent in her. Nevertheless, she maintained that only she could be trusted and continued her insistence. The absurdity of her demands was starting to wear me down, and I firmly told her that we were finished discussing this topic. I suggested that if she wished to continue the conversation, she could speak to my husband about it later. Later, I shared the details of our lunch with my husband's sister, who was equally upset by my mother-in-law's attempts to undermine her. My husband also found her behavior baffling and began ignoring her calls after that incident. Recently, my sister-in-law gave birth to her daughter and asked me to be with her in the delivery room for support. Given my own experience, I happily agreed and was there for her throughout the night while my husband and my mother looked after our son at home. The next morning, after my sister-in-law had given birth, I reflected on the overwhelming experiences surrounding both pregnancies, as well as the challenges posed by my mother-in-law's controlling nature. After Sil gave birth, I made sure her boyfriend could take care of things before I headed home to get some much-needed rest. Throughout that day, I kept receiving calls from Mil, but I felt too exhausted to pick up the phone, as I preferred spending time with my son. Later in the evening, my husband returned home after visiting his sister. He appeared amused, and I initially thought he was simply happy to see his new nephew. However, he then shared some surprising news that caught me off guard. It turned out that Sil, who had grown weary of Mil's toxic behavior, had finally decided to stand up for herself. She implemented a no-contact rule between Mil and her daughter, which was quite a bold move. My husband explained how, when Mil unexpectedly showed up at the hospital, Sil had instructed the nurses to deny her entry. Only Sil's boyfriend was allowed to go in and meet the baby. Sil wanted to protect her daughter from her mother's critical judgments, and this decision seemed shocking to me. I had never imagined that Sil would take such a firm stance against Mil. It also made sense why Mil had been trying to reach me all day long. She might have been looking to blame me or persuade me to convince Sil to let her see her granddaughter. Later, when I spoke with Sil, I learned that her decision stemmed from finally realizing the extent of Mil's negativity towards me over the years. Setting this boundary was crucial for Sil to shield her daughter from Mil's harmful influence. This moment marked a significant turning point for Mil, as the fallout from her actions became apparent. Mil was now completely cut off from her daughter's life, unable to experience the special moments of her grandchild's early days. As I absorbed this situation, I began to contemplate whether it would be wise for my husband and me to also consider a permanent cutoff from Mil. Would it be too harsh to make such a decision? In an update, I expressed my gratitude to everyone who offered their support and advice. I hadn't anticipated such a quick response to my situation. Since finding out about Sil's decision to cut Mil off, my husband and I have had no contact with her. We choose to ignore her calls, which have continued. After discussing my thoughts with my husband, we both agreed that for our mental well-being, it would be best to sever ties with Mil entirely. There is no assurance that she wouldn't act the same way she did with me towards our son. For those wondering why we waited so long to reach this conclusion, it is important to understand that my husband is the oldest child in a toxic family environment. He didn't fully grasp how troubling this all was until his mother began mistreating me. Throughout our relationship, he has always supported and protected me, but dealing with his mother has become overwhelming. We arranged a group video call with his sister and Phil to discuss our decision, and they were supportive of our choice. Now, we just needed to inform Mil of our decision. In another update, I shared that my husband called Mil to inform her of our choice. When she answered the phone, she immediately began yelling at him about how long it had been since they last spoke and insisted that she wanted to meet our son right away. My husband listened patiently until she finished her demands, after which he gently told her that she was correct in saying he needed to be more assertive. Mil seized this moment to agree, claiming that this was what she had always wanted from him. However, my husband interrupted her, clarifying that as the man of our family, he had decided to cut her off permanently to protect us from her toxicity and drama. Mil was momentarily stunned by his words, likely trying to comprehend the gravity of what he had just stated. Once she realized the seriousness of our decision, she began insisting that she was coming over to meet us, declaring that nothing would stop her from seeing her grandson. My husband quickly warned her that we would not allow her in our home and that we would call the police if she tried to trespass. In response, she started shouting angrily, clearly unprepared for the boundaries we were setting. She began to scream loudly, accusing me of being the one responsible for this situation, claiming that I was tearing the family apart. My husband, visibly frustrated by her outburst, told her that she could believe whatever she wanted, but he was finished with the drama she was creating. Even after his words, she kept yelling, insisting that this was the reason he should never have married someone like me. She claimed to have known all along that I was trouble, a bad influence. My husband, naturally irritated by her accusations, reminded her that we were not the only ones who had cut ties with her. His sister had also distanced herself from their mother. He stressed that the problem clearly lay with her, and it was time for her to accept that fact. In a familiar pattern, she argued back, accusing me of turning everyone against her and claiming that I had taken her children away from her. In response, my husband, filled with exasperation, pointed out that if she wanted to find someone to blame, she ought to look in the mirror. He called her out for being bitter and racist, making it clear that everyone around her was simply done with her behavior. This finally silenced my mother-in-law, and after their conversation, he blocked her from reaching out. Following his lead, I did the same, making it known to my family that they should not answer her calls for the time being. While I feel some sympathy for my husband and his sister for lacking a supportive mother figure, I also feel a sense of relief knowing that I will not have to deal with such toxic situations again. It has now been 2 months since I last provided an update, and I am pleased to report that our son is thriving. My relationship with my husband's sister remains strong. We frequently meet up so our children can enjoy playdates together. It's heartwarming to witness the bond they are forming, and I sincerely hope that they will grow up to be the best of friends. Another piece of good news is that my sister-in-law is finally getting married to the father of her child, which is something we all anticipated would happen. As for the main update regarding my mother-in-law, we have maintained our decision to remain no contact. Many people were concerned about our safety, but there is no need for worry. We have installed cameras throughout our home and changed our locks, ensuring that she cannot invade our space. It seems unlikely that she would confront us in a public setting, especially since many people are now aware of why we have distanced ourselves from her. She must feel embarrassed by how things have unfolded. After we cut off contact, she attempted to persuade my husband's sister to speak with us, but Phil made it clear that he was tired of her antics as well. Perhaps hearing this from her own son made her reconsider her actions. A few weeks later, she asked Phil to convey her apologies to us for everything she had done. However, I remain skeptical about her sincerity, which is why we continue to keep our distance. Currently, Phil and my family regularly visit us and enjoy time bonding with our grandchild, and this is how we intend to keep things moving forward in the future.